So there's a dire aspect of climate change that most people don't seem to know about called positive feedback loops. I'm going to keep a rational mindset and cite every fact that I use at the bottom of the screen and in the video description to avoid letting this become like most arguments over climate change that are basically just factless shouting matches. In the interest of balancing the argument, I'm also going to start out by looking at climate change through the eyes of a global warming skeptic. Their point of view is valid, not only because every person's point of view is valid and should be considered logically before you call them naive, but also because when you really think about it, it truly is hard to believe that man-made carbon emissions can really have that big of an effect on the climate of an entire planet. In the end, all human activity is really doing is putting some carbon dioxide in the air. And there's so much air! In fact, there's so much that historically the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air has only ever been about as much as 280 parts per million. That means that if you looked at all of the molecules in a sample of air, only 1 out of 3,570 of them would be a carbon dioxide molecule. Granted, that number has gone up a lot in the past few decades. As of the beginning of 2013, we're at a little over 390 parts per million. But even if that historical limit of 280 were to double, that's still a minuscule percentage of the atmosphere. It doesn't seem like that can do much warming of the globe. The problem is that you can't just look at the direct impact of carbon dioxide on temperature, because the Earth is a vast and intertwined ecosystem where one small change can have a significant effect on dozens of other processes. And that's where we get into feedback loops. One of the simplest loops is water vapor feedback. When the atmosphere gets just a little bit warmer, more water will evaporate from the ocean. And water vapor is a greenhouse gas just like carbon dioxide. So we put some carbon dioxide in the air. That heats things up a little bit, which puts more water vapor in the air, which heats things up a little more, which puts even more water vapor in the air, and so on and so on. That's a feedback loop. Do you get it? We create a small change in the environment, and that kicks off processes that feed off themselves, eventually creating a large change. And water vapor feedback isn't even close to being the most serious feedback loop. Another easy one to understand is melting ice. First of all, melting ice results in more water, which contributes to the water vapor feedback loop. But ice is also reflective, so when solar radiation, sunlight, enters the Earth's atmosphere and ends up hitting ice, most of it gets reflected back out without heating anything up much. And considering that 10% of the Earth is covered in ice, that's a significant portion of the sunlight that hits the Earth that just gets bounced back out instead of heating it up. But as the ice starts disappearing, that sunlight will hit either water or land, which will absorb most of the heat instead of reflecting it, which will warm the planet, which will cause more ice to disappear, and so on and so on. Feedback loop. This is also the feedback loop which is easiest to see, and I can say numbers at you all day, but there's something about actually seeing global warming in action that makes it more real.
Now we turn on our time lapse. This camera was shooting every hour. Geologic process in action here. They're also deflating, like air is being let out of a balloon. There's a marker line called the trim line. The deflation of this glacier since 1984 has been higher than the Eiffel Tower. We recorded the biggest calving event that's ever been put on film. We had 9 cameras going. This is what a couple of the cameras saw. Mile of retreat in 75 minutes, across a calving face in that particular event 3 miles wide. The block was 3/5 of a mile deep, and if you compare the expanse of the calving face to the U.S. Capitol building, and you pack 3,000 Capitol buildings into that block, it would be equivalent to how large that block was. 75 minutes.
If you want to see that whole presentation, there's a link to it in the video description. And there are many more feedback loops. Desertification, forest fires, acidification of the ocean, but I just want to describe one last one because melting ice might be the most visually dramatic feedback loop, but it is again by no means the most serious. The feedback loop that scientists are most worried about lies in permafrost. Permafrost is basically just a patch of ground that is frozen and never thaws out. Permafrost, permanently frozen. The Earth has enormous swaths of permafrost, and there's so much carbon dioxide and methane trapped in the frozen ground there that experts say, worst case scenario, permafrost will start thawing, and by 2040 it'll be releasing 30 to 63 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, as opposed to the 10 billion tons per year due to fossil fuel emissions today. For those of you that missed that, in 27 years, which is like no time at all, these things could be putting 3 to 6 times as much carbon into the air every year as we are now. Are you holy serious? This will result in more warming, which will result in more permafrost thawing. Feedback loop. And in less than a century, the permafrost could be releasing 23 to 38 times as much carbon as we currently are. Every year. Back to the debate about global warming for a second. First of all, some people will inevitably still bash this video and climate science in general. This damn hippie Democrat is just trying to scare the First of all, I'm a Republican. A liberal Republican? Wait, what? See, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Never mind. And secondly, if I saw a train barreling towards you but couldn't see that the tracks swerved right before they got to you, would you still hold it against me for yelling at you to get out of the way? Even if the climate scientists were wrong, they truly believe the Earth is on the verge of crisis. So don't spew hatred at them. They're trying to save you. They're trying to save everyone. We need to have rational debates about this. If you disagree, calmly point out that you see where the tracks swerve and that the train won't hit you. Then perhaps the scientists might be able to show you that those tracks you see are merely a convincing picture that someone painted there and that you're standing directly on the real tracks. One completely valid argument that someone could make against me here is that my numbers are off, because I can tell you that despite my best effort to find only the most reliable information, some of it will turn out to be wrong, one way or the other. But even if all those figures are overestimations, even if they're off by a factor of 10, we are still at the brink of arguably the biggest emergency humanity has ever faced. But there is good news, I promise! I know this seems insurmountable, it's extremely dismal, even terrifying. But if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. We can stop this! The train is not here yet. There's still time to lay down new tracks so that it misses us, but only if we start right now. If you're on board, perhaps the biggest thing you can do is tell your governmental representatives that you demand reform so that if enough people do the same, policies will be enacted on national and international levels. And start doing research to find out what you can do to reduce your own carbon footprint. I know it seems like one person changing their ways won't have an effect, but if we all do, it will. So share this video or any other reliable information you can find so that once everyone's on board, we can stop this. Nailed that.